The ivory keys felt cold beneath my fingers. Each note I struck sending a peculiar flutter through my chest. I paused mid-arpeggio, pressing my palm flat against my breastbone, willing the irregular rhythm to settle. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the Conservatorio Municipal, casting long shadows across the practice room where I'd spent the last 6 hours teaching. My name is Valentina Montero, and I'd been teaching piano here for 3 years, building a life I'd carefully constructed from sheet music and metronome clicks. At 26, I should have felt invincible, but lately, my body had been whispering warnings I'd chosen to ignore. The shortness of breath after climbing 2 flights of stairs, the dizzy spells I attributed to skipping lunch, the persistent exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. I glanced at the antique clock mounted above the door. 5:47 p.m. My last student of the day had left 13 minutes ago, a precocious 8-year-old who'd finally mastered Chopin's Prelude in E minor. I should have been packing up my things, heading home to my small apartment where my cat, Amadeus, would be demanding dinner. Instead, I sat frozen on the piano bench, my hand still pressed against my chest, counting the erratic beats. 1, 2, skip. 3, 4, skip, skip. 5. The pattern was getting worse. 3 weeks ago, it had been occasional. 2 weeks ago, daily. Now it was constant, and a rhythmic percussion that accompanied everything I did. I'd been telling myself it was stress, caffeine, lack of sleep, anything but what it might actually be. My grandmother had died at 52. Heart failure, they'd said. Genetic, they'd warned my mother. Watch for symptoms, they'd cautioned. But I'd been so careful, so healthy. I didn't smoke, barely drank, ate vegetables like they were going out of style. This wasn't supposed to happen to me. Miss Montero! A voice from the doorway made me jump, my hands flying to the keys in a discordant crash of notes. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. I turned to find a man I'd never seen before standing in the threshold. He was tall, perhaps early 30s, with dark hair that fell slightly across his forehead and eyes the color of warm amber. He wore a simple charcoal sweater and jeans, but something about the way he carried himself suggested careful attention to detail. In his hands, he held a leather portfolio that looked expensive, well worn in that way that spoke of quality, rather than age. The office is closed, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the fact that my heart had just performed an entirely new variation of irregular beats. If you need to register for classes, you'll have to come back tomorrow morning. Actually, he said, taking a tentative step into the room, I was hoping to speak with you specifically. Your colleague, Mariana. She mentioned you might be willing to take on an adult student. I know it's unconventional, showing up without an appointment, but I've been trying to reach the conservatory for days and... I don't teach adults, I interrupted, perhaps more sharply than necessary. The truth was, I'd stopped taking adult students 2 years ago after a particularly uncomfortable situation with a man who'd mistaken my professional kindness for something else. I work exclusively with children and teenagers. He didn't leave. Instead, he moved further into the room, his gaze drifting to the Steinway grand piano that dominated the space. That's beautiful, he said, running his fingers along its polished edge without actually touching it, maintaining a reverent distance. A Model D, if I'm not mistaken. 1960s? Despite myself, I felt a flicker of interest. Most people couldn't tell a Steinway from a Yamaha. 1967, I corrected. It was donated to the conservatory by a former student who went on to play with the São Paulo Symphony. How did you... My mother was a pianist, he said softly, and something in his voice made me look at him more carefully. There was grief there, old but not forgotten. She had a Model B at home. I spent my childhood listening to her practice Rachmaninoff until the neighbors complained. Was? I asked, before I could stop myself. She passed away when I was 19, he said, meeting my eyes. Stroke. She was in the middle of a Beethoven sonata. I found her at the piano. The raw honesty of his words created an unexpected intimacy in the room. I found myself softening despite my better judgment. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Thank you. He shifted the portfolio to his other hand. I'm Rafael Estrada. I'm an architect, and I've just moved to the city for a project. The renovation of the Teatro Municipal, actually. I used to play when I was younger before my mother died, but after. I couldn't touch a piano for years. But lately I've been thinking about how much I miss it. How much I miss that connection to her. There was something in his voice. A vulnerability that seemed at odds with his confident posture. That made me reconsider my immediate dismissal. I studied his hands more carefully now, noting the long fingers, the careful way he held them, as if they remembered the shape of keys even after years away. I really don't, I began, but my words were cut short by a sudden violent flutter in my chest. This wasn't the irregular skip I'd been experiencing. This was something else entirely. The room tilted sharply to the left, and I gripped the edge of the piano bench, my knuckles going white. Are you all right? Raphael was beside me in an instant, his portfolio dropped forgotten on a chair, his hand hovering near my shoulder but not quite touching. You've gone completely pale. I'm fine, I lied, the words automatic after weeks of practice. Just tired. It's been a long day. But even as I said it, I could feel the cold sweat breaking out on my forehead, the way my vision was starting to narrow at the edges, darkening like an old photograph left in the sun. My heart wasn't just skipping now. It was racing, a wild gallop that made my whole body shake. You don't look fine, Raphael said, and now his hand did touch my shoulder, steady and warm. When was the last time you ate something? I couldn't remember. Breakfast. Had I eaten breakfast? There'd been coffee, I was certain of that, because I could still taste its bitterness on my tongue. But food? My mind was blank, fuzzy around the edges. I should go home, I managed, trying to stand. My legs had other ideas, buckling beneath me like wet cardboard. Raphael caught me, one arm around my waist, the other supporting my elbow. His grip was firm but gentle, holding me up without making me feel trapped. I don't think that's a good idea right now. Is there someone I should call? A family member? A friend? My parents lived 300 miles away in Porto Alegre. I had friends. Of course, Mariana from work, some former classmates I saw occasionally, but no one close enough to call in a moment like this. The conservatory had become my whole world, my students my only real connections. It was safer that way, I'd told myself. Simpler, less complicated. I'm fine, I repeated, but the words were weaker this time, less convincing even to my own ears. This happens sometimes. Low blood sugar, that's all. Raphael's expression suggested he didn't believe me for a second, but he didn't argue. Instead, he helped me back onto the piano bench, then disappeared into the hallway. I heard his footsteps, quick and purposeful, then the sound of a vending machine dispensing something. He returned moments later with a bottle of orange juice and a granola bar, the cheap kind that tasted like cardboard and optimism. Drink this, he said, unscrewing the cap and placing the bottle in my shaking hands. Slowly. I obeyed, taking small sips of the too-sweet juice, feeling the sugar hit my system like a punch. The world gradually came back into focus, the darkness at the edges of my vision receding. My heartbeat didn't settle. It was still doing its chaotic dance, but at least I could breathe again. Raphael crouched beside me, watching with the careful attention of someone who knew what real concern looked like. Better? He asked after a few minutes. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. My hands were still trembling, making small ripples in the orange juice. "This isn't low blood sugar," he said quietly. "I have a sister with diabetes. I know what that looks like. This is something else. Smart and observant, wonderful. Just what I needed. A stranger with medical knowledge and good instincts." "I appreciate your concern," I said, forcing strength into my voice that I didn't feel. "But I really am fine. And I'm afraid I still can't take you on as a student. Perhaps Mariana can recommend someone else who teaches adults." I thought he would leave then, accept my dismissal, and walk out of my life as abruptly as he'd entered it. Most people would. Most people were happy to pretend they hadn't seen someone nearly collapse, eager to escape the uncomfortable responsibility of someone else's crisis. Instead, Raphael pulled out his phone. "I'll make you a deal," he said, his voice gentle but absolutely firm. "I'll leave right now, without arguing, if you promise to see a doctor. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, tonight." "I don't need—" "You almost fainted in front of a complete stranger," Raphael interrupted, his amber eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. "You're clearly exhausted. You can't remember when you last ate. And whatever just happened wasn't normal. I watched my mother die because she ignored symptoms, because she kept saying she was fine when she wasn't. So here's what's going to happen. Either you agree to see a doctor, or I'm calling an ambulance right now." The determination in his eyes told me he wasn't bluffing. I could see it in the set of his jaw, the way his finger hovered over his phone screen, ready to dial. This wasn't casual concern from a well-meaning stranger. This was personal for him, driven by something deeper than polite worry. "You're very pushy for someone who just met me," I said, aiming for irritation but landing somewhere closer to resignation. "I'm thorough," he corrected. "It's why I'm good at my job. I don't ignore structural problems and hope they'll fix themselves. So what's it going to be?" I looked at the stranger who'd walked into my practice room with his portfolio and his amber eyes and his unexpected concern. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave, to mind his own business, to let me handle my own life the way I'd been doing for 26 years. But another part, the part that had felt my heart skip and stumble all afternoon, the part that was terrified of ending up like my grandmother, knew he was right. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll go to the emergency room. Promise? Promise." He studied me for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether I was telling the truth or just saying what he wanted to hear. Then he nodded, standing and offering me his hand. "Good. Then I'll drive you." "That's not necessary." "Miss Montero," he said, and there was something in the way he said my name, careful and respectful, but uncompromising, that made me stop protesting. "I'm going to drive you to the hospital, wait while you're seen by a doctor, and then drive you home. You can argue with me about it, or you can accept it. But either way, it's happening." I should have been angry at his presumption. Should have told him I didn't need a knight in shining armor, that I'd been taking care of myself just fine, thank you very much. But the truth was, I was tired. So tired. Tired of pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. Tired of being strong and independent and alone. And the idea of not having to navigate this alone, just this once, was almost impossibly appealing. "All right," I heard myself say. "But just to the hospital. After that, I can manage on my own." Raphael's smile was small but genuine. "Whatever you say." As I gathered my things with trembling hands, carefully stacking sheet music and zipping my worn leather bag, I caught sight of my reflection in the piano's polished surface. I looked pale, my dark hair escaping from its usual neat bun, my green eyes shadowed with an exhaustion I could no longer deny. I looked sick. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was sick, really sick, and I'd been pretending otherwise for far too long. Raphael's car was exactly what I would have expected from an architect. A sleek silver Audi with clean lines and an interior that smelled of leather and subtle cologne. He helped me into the passenger seat with the same careful consideration he'd shown in the practice room, making sure I was settled before closing the door. The drive to Hospital San Lucas took 15 minutes through evening traffic. Raphael didn't try to make small talk, didn't fill the silence with meaningless chatter. Instead, he simply asked, "Do you need me to call anyone?" when we were halfway there. "No," I said, staring out the window at the city lights beginning to flicker on. "There's no one." I felt his glance, quick and assessing, but he didn't comment on the loneliness inherent in those words. The emergency room was exactly as crowded and chaotic as I'd feared. The triage nurse took one look at me, asked about my symptoms, and immediately put a pulse oximeter on my finger. Her expression tightened when she saw the reading. "How long have you been experiencing heart palpitations?" she asked, already typing notes into her computer. "A few weeks," I admitted. "And you're just now coming in?" I didn't have a good answer for that. They took me back almost immediately, bypassing the waiting room full of people with presumably less urgent problems. Raphael followed without being asked, his presence somehow both comforting and unsettling. I barely knew this man, yet here he was, about to witness whatever came next. "You don't have to stay," I told him as a nurse helped me into a hospital gown. "Really? I'm sure you have better things to do with your evening." "I'm exactly where I need to be," he said simply, taking a seat in the corner chair. The next hours were a blur of tests. EKG, blood work, chest x-ray, echocardiogram. Doctors came and went, their faces professionally neutral as they asked questions and made notes. Raphael stayed through all of it, a quiet presence in the corner, occasionally stepping out to make phone calls but always returning. It was nearly 11 p.m. when Dr. Helena Cardoso finally came in with results. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes, and the sort of directness that suggested she didn't believe in sugarcoating. "Miss Montero," she said, pulling up a chair beside my hospital bed. "I need to talk to you about what we found." My heart, my traitorous, failing heart, began to race again. Raphael stood from his corner chair, and I found myself grateful for his presence. "You have what's called dilated cardiomyopathy," Dr. Cardoso said. "It's a condition where the heart muscle becomes weakened and enlarged, making it harder for the heart to pump blood efficiently. In your case, it appears to be genetic, likely the same condition that affected your grandmother." The room seemed to tilt again, but this time it had nothing to do with low blood sugar. "How bad is it?" I managed to ask. Dr. Cardoso's expression was gentle but honest. "Bad enough that you need to start treatment immediately. Medication, lifestyle changes, close monitoring, and depending on how you respond to treatment." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We may need to discuss more aggressive interventions." "Like what?" "Let's focus on the medication first," she said, which I understood to mean the alternatives were too frightening to discuss right now. "I'm going to keep you overnight for observation. Start you on beta blockers and ACE inhibitors. We'll see how you respond." After she left, the silence in the room was deafening. I stared at the IV line in my arm, at the heart monitor beeping its irregular rhythm, at the future I'd thought I had crumbling like sheet music left in the rain. "Valentina," Raphael said softly, using my first name for the first time. "I'm sorry." "You don't have to stay," I said again, my voice cracking. "I'm sure this isn't how you imagined your evening going when you came looking for piano lessons." "No," he agreed. "It's not. But I'm staying anyway." And he did. Through the long night, through my tears, through the nurses coming in every 2 hours to check my vitals, he stayed. I didn't know it then, as I finally fell asleep to the sound of my failing heart on the monitor. But Rafael Estrada had just become the most dangerous thing in my carefully controlled world. Because for the first time in years, I was starting to want something I couldn't have. I was starting to want tomorrow. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and the peculiar staleness of air that had been recycled too many times. I woke to weak sunlight filtering through industrial blinds and the steady beep of the heart monitor that had become the soundtrack to my new reality. My mouth tasted like cotton, and every muscle in my body ached from a night spent in a bed designed by someone who'd clearly never experienced sleep. Rafael was still there. He'd shifted positions at some point during the night, moving from the uncomfortable plastic chair to a slightly less uncomfortable vinyl love seat beneath the window. His long frame was folded awkwardly, one arm tucked under his head as a pillow, his charcoal sweater wrinkled. He looked deeply uncomfortable and absolutely determined, even in sleep. I studied him in the morning light, this stranger who'd crashed into my life at exactly the wrong moment. Or maybe, a traitorous voice whispered in my mind, exactly the right one. His face was softer in sleep, the worry lines around his eyes smoothed out. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow that I hadn't noticed before, and his stubble had darkened overnight, giving him a slightly disheveled appearance that was oddly appealing. "Stop it," I told myself firmly. "You have a degenerative heart condition. You are not thinking about how attractive he is." As if sensing my gaze, Rafael's eyes opened. For a moment he looked disoriented, clearly forgetting where he was. Then his eyes found mine, and he sat up quickly, running a hand through his hair. "You're awake," he said unnecessarily. "How are you feeling?" "Like I spent the night in a hospital," I said, aiming for levity and missing by a mile. My voice came out rough, emotional. "You didn't have to stay. You must be incredibly uncomfortable." "I've slept in worse places," he said, stretching with a wince that suggested his back disagreed. "Construction sites, airport terminals, my college dorm room that one semester, I had 3 roommates." He stood, moving to the small table where someone, probably a nurse, had left a pitcher of water in a plastic cup. "May I?" I nodded, and he poured water with the same careful attention he seemed to bring to everything. He helped me sit up slightly, adjusting the bed with the controls, before handing me the cup. His fingers brushed mine in the transfer, warm and steady. "Thank you," I said softly. "For staying, for everything. But really, you should go home. Get some proper rest. I'm sure you have work." "I called my office this morning while you were sleeping," he interrupted. "Told them I had a personal emergency and would be working remotely for the next few days. Rafael, you can't just—" "I can. And I did." His voice was gentle but firm. "Besides, don't you have people you need to call? Your family? Your work?" The reminder sent a spike of anxiety through me. My parents, the conservatory, Amadeus, who'd been alone all night without food or water. The practical realities of chronic illness were already piling up, and I'd been diagnosed less than 12 hours ago. "My cat," I said suddenly. "I have a cat. He's been alone all night." "Give me your keys and your address," Rafael said immediately. "I'll go feed him and make sure he's okay." "You don't have to—" "Valentina." The way he said my name stopped my protest cold. "Let me help, please." There was something in his eyes, a kind of desperate need that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the mother he'd lost. He needed to fix this, to save someone, to make sure the ending was different this time. I recognized it because I'd seen the same look in the mirror after my grandmother died, the futile wish that we could rewrite the past by controlling the present. "Okay," I said quietly, telling him where I kept my spare key hidden under the doormat. "His name is Amadeus. He's a gray tabby with a judgmental expression and a preference for wet food. The cans are in the cupboard above the sink." Rafael smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his tired face. "Amadeus. Of course. He is. I'll be back in an hour." After he left, I called my mother. The conversation was exactly as difficult as I'd anticipated. A heart condition? Her voice climbed an octave. Valentina, how long have you been having symptoms? Why didn't you tell us? We need to come there immediately. Mom, please. I pressed my free hand against my forehead, where a headache was beginning to bloom. I'm okay. They're starting me on medication, and I'll have regular checkups. There's no need for you and Popeye to drop everything. No need? You have the same condition that killed your grandmother. The words hung between us, the truth we'd both been avoiding since Dr. Cardoso's diagnosis. My grandmother had died at 52. I was 26. Basic math suggested I had, at best, 26 years left. At worst. I'm not Vovo, I said, more to convince myself than her. Medicine has advanced. They have treatments now that didn't exist back then. We're coming to see you this weekend, my mother declared, using the tone that meant arguing was futile. Your father is already looking at bus schedules. After she hung up, I called Mariana at the conservatory. She was appropriately horrified and immediately understanding about me needing time off. Take as long as you need, she insisted. Your students will understand. Your health comes first, Valentina. But as I ended the call, reality settled over me like a heavy blanket. My students depended on me. The conservatory depended on me. More importantly, my rent depended on my salary, and my medical bills were about to become astronomical. Brazil's public health system would cover the basics, but the medications Dr. Cardoso mentioned, the regular monitoring, the potential future interventions, those would add up quickly. I was still calculating mental budgets when Dr. Cardoso returned with a younger doctor in tow, a cardiologist specialist named Dr. Renato Ferreira. They spent 30 minutes explaining my condition in more detail, using terms like ejection fraction and ventricular remodeling that might as well have been in another language. The summary was simple enough, though. My heart was failing. The medications would help, but there were no guarantees. I would need to avoid stress, impossible, get plenty of rest, laughable for someone with my schedule, and come in for regular monitoring. There was a 25% chance I would stabilize on medication, a 50% chance I would continue to decline slowly, and a 25% chance I would decline rapidly. And if I decline rapidly? I made myself ask. Dr. Ferreira and Dr. Cardoso exchanged a glance. Then we'll need to consider more aggressive treatment options, Dr. Ferreira said carefully, including the possibility of a transplant, though I want to emphasize that we're nowhere near that conversation yet. A transplant. The word echoed in my mind long after they'd left, long after the nurse came in with my discharge papers and a plastic bag full of medication bottles, each with warnings about side effects and interactions. Raphael returned as promised, smelling of fresh air and carrying a small duffel bag. Amadeus is fed and deeply unimpressed with my existence, he reported. I also packed you some clothes and toiletries. I hope that's okay. I tried to guess what you'd need. I looked in the bag to find a clean outfit, my toothbrush, and even the small jade turtle I kept on my nightstand. A gift from my grandmother. The attention to detail made my throat tight. Thank you, I managed, for all of this. I don't know how I can... You don't have to repay me, Raphael said quickly. I'm not keeping score. But why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. He was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the city beyond. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. When my mother had her stroke, I was at a friend's house. She called me 3 times, but I didn't answer because we were watching a movie and I'd silenced my phone. By the time I got home, it was too late. The paramedics said if someone had found her even 30 minutes earlier. He trailed off. I've spent the last 12 years wondering what would have happened if I'd answered the phone. If I'd been there. If I'd paid attention to the signs she'd been showing for weeks. Raphael, that's not— I know it's not my fault, he interrupted. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't change how it feels. So when I saw you yesterday, clearly unwell and clearly ignoring it, I couldn't walk away. I couldn't be the person who doesn't answer the phone again. The raw honesty in his voice broke something open in my chest. I understood, suddenly and completely, that this wasn't about me at all. I was a proxy for his mother, a chance at redemption for a tragedy that was never his to fix. I'm not your second chance, I said gently. You can't save me to make up for not saving her. I know, he said, meeting my eyes. But maybe I can help you save yourself. They discharged me an hour later with instructions to rest, take my medications religiously, and follow up with Dr. Cardoso in 1 week. Raphael drove me home in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that didn't need filling. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, if slightly rearranged by Raphael's visit. Amadeus greeted me with his usual indifference, then immediately began demanding his afternoon meal despite having been fed only hours earlier. He's very food-motivated, I explained as Raphael helped me settle onto my couch. I noticed, Raphael said dryly. He tried to eat my shoelace while I was feeding him. The domesticity of the moment, the two of us in my tiny apartment, discussing my ridiculous cat as if this were normal, as if we were friends, as if my world hadn't just completely shattered, was almost painful in its ordinary sweetness. Raphael, I said as he moved toward the door, clearly intending to leave. I need to say something, and I need you to really hear me. He turned, waiting. This thing with my heart. It's not going to get better. Best case scenario, the medications slow down the progression. Worst case. I made myself say it. Worst case, I have maybe a few years. And even if I get a transplant, there are no guarantees. So whatever this is, I gestured between us. Whatever you think might happen here, it can't. I won't let you invest in someone who comes with an expiration date. Raphael looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled. Valentina, he said, everyone comes with an expiration date. We just don't usually know when it is. At least you're honest about it. I'm serious. So am I. He crossed back to where I sat, crouching so we were eye level. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not declaring eternal love. I'm just saying, let me be your friend. Let me help you through this. And if somewhere along the way it becomes more than that. He shrugged. We'll deal with it then. But for now, can we just start with friendship? I wanted to say no. Wanted to protect him from the inevitable heartbreak, to push him away before he got too close. But I was so tired of being alone. So tired of pretending I was strong enough to handle everything by myself. Just friends? I said finally. Just friends, he agreed, standing and offering his hand. Friends who occasionally make sure each other don't collapse in practice rooms. I took his hand, his grip warm and steady. That seems fair. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the medication bottles that were supposed to keep me alive, and the silence that had been my constant companion for years. Amadeus jumped into my lap, purring his judgmental purr, and I buried my face in his fur. I had a degenerative heart condition. I had a stranger who'd appointed himself my guardian angel. I had parents who would arrive this weekend with worry and love and all the complicated family dynamics I'd been avoiding. And I had a choice. I could push everyone away, protect them from the pain of my inevitable decline. Or I could accept help, accept friendship, accept that maybe, just maybe, the time I had left deserved to be lived instead of endured. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Made it home safely. Amadeus glared at me through your window as I left. I think he's protective of you. Smart cat. Raphael. Despite everything, I smiled. He's an excellent judge of character, I typed back. Should I be worried? Came the immediate response. Definitely, I replied. My phone rang a moment later. Raphael's voice was warm with amusement. You're going to make me work for this friendship, aren't you? Would you respect me if I didn't? Absolutely not, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Speaking of which, have you eaten today? I looked at the time. 3:47 p.m. I'd had half a piece of hospital toast this morning. Define eaten, I hedged. I'm bringing dinner at 7, Raphael declared. Nothing fancy, just soup and bread from the place near your apartment. The medications you're on work better with food. You've researched my medications? I'm thorough, remember? 7 o'clock, Valentina. And if you even think about telling me not to come, I'll have Amadeus call me. You can't train cats, I started, but he'd already hung up. I sat there, phone in hand, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. It wasn't my malfunctioning heart, though that was doing its usual irregular dance. It was something else, something warmer, something dangerous. It was hope, and hope, I was beginning to realize, might be the most terrifying diagnosis of all. Raphael arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, with 2 containers of caldo verde and a loaf of still-warm pão de queijo wrapped in paper that left grease stains on the bag. The smell alone was enough to make my stomach growl audibly, betraying the fact that I'd eaten nothing since the hospital toast. I heard that, he said, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth as he unpacked the food on my small kitchen table. When was the last time you ate a proper meal? I'm beginning to think you're monitoring me, I said, but there was no heat in the words. Truth was, I'd been staring at my refrigerator for the past hour, trying to muster the energy to cook something, anything, but the exhaustion that came with the new medications had pinned me to the couch like a weight. Someone has to, Raphael replied, ladling soup into the mismatched bowls I'd collected from various thrift stores over the years. Dr. Cardoso's instructions said regular meals. I'm just making sure you follow doctor's orders. I wanted to argue, to insist I was perfectly capable of feeding myself, but the truth was, I'd been surviving on coffee and determination for so long that actual nutrition felt like a foreign concept. I accepted the bowl he offered and took a tentative sip. The soup was perfect, hearty and warming, with just enough spice to remind me I was alive. This is really good, I admitted. My mother's recipe, Raphael said quietly, settling across from me with his own bowl. She used to make it every Sunday. I called my aunt this afternoon to get the exact measurements. The casual mention of his mother hung in the air between us. I watched him break apart a piece of pão de queijo, his movements careful and deliberate, and wondered what it cost him to make this soup, to resurrect memories that must still ache. Tell me about her, I said softly. Your mother, if you want to. Raphael looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Then something softened in his expression, and he set down his spoon. Maria Estrada, he said, and there was reverence in the way he spoke her name. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, but she had this presence that filled entire rooms. When she played piano, grown men would cry. She performed all over Brazil in her 20s, but then she got pregnant with me and decided she wanted to teach instead. Said bringing music into people's homes was more important than performing in concert halls. She sounds remarkable. She was. He paused, turning his spoon over in his hands. She was also stubborn as hell. When she started having headaches, dizzy spells, moments where she'd forget words mid-sentence, she blamed it on stress. Getting older, being tired. She ignored every warning sign because she had students to teach and a son to raise and a life to live. And then one day, while she was playing Beethoven, her brain just stopped working. The parallel to my own situation wasn't lost on either of us. I'm not her, I said gently. I'm not ignoring the signs anymore. I'm taking the medications, following the treatment plan. I know. Raphael met my eyes. And I know I'm probably being overprotective, projecting my own trauma onto your situation. My therapist would have a field day with this. You see a therapist? For the past 10 years, he said without shame. Twice a month. Best decision I ever made, honestly. Grief doesn't go away, but at least now I know how to live with it instead of drowning in it. The honesty was disarming. Most people, especially men, didn't talk about therapy like it was as normal as going to the dentist. But Raphael spoke about his emotional health with the same practical directness he brought to everything else. I should probably get a therapist, I heard myself say. Processing a terminal diagnosis with just my cat seems inadequate. Degenerative, Raphael corrected. Not terminal. There's a difference. Is there? I pushed my soup away, my appetite suddenly gone. The doctor said best case scenario. I stabilize on medication. That's not getting better, Raphael. That's just delaying the inevitable. Isn't that what all of life is? He leaned forward, his amber eyes intense. Delaying the inevitable? I could walk outside right now and get hit by a bus. You could respond beautifully to treatment and live another 50 years. We don't know, Valentina. That's the whole point. None of us know. Yes, but most people don't have cardiologists giving them statistical breakdowns of their mortality. I was interrupted by a violent flutter in my chest, the kind that made my vision blur at the edges. My hand flew to my breastbone, pressing hard as if I could manually regulate the rhythm. Raphael was beside me in an instant, his hand on my shoulder. Breathe, he said calmly. In through your nose, out through your mouth, nice and slow. I followed his instructions, focusing on the steady rise and fall of my chest, the cool air entering my lungs, the warmth of his hand anchoring me to the present. Gradually, my heart settled back into its usual irregular pattern, abnormal, but at least not acutely dangerous. Better? Raphael asked after a minute. I nodded, not trusting my voice. This was the reality now. Random episodes that could strike any time, anywhere. The constant awareness of my own mortality beating an irregular rhythm in my chest. You should rest, Raphael said, already clearing the table. I'll clean up. You don't have to... Valentina. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression that made me stop protesting. Let me help, please. Even if it's just washing dishes. So I let him. I moved to the couch, Amadeus immediately claiming my lap, while Raphael moved around my tiny kitchen with surprising efficiency. He washed dishes, wiped down counters, even organized my spice cabinet, which had been a chaotic mess since I'd moved in 3 years ago. You know, I said, watching him work, for someone who just met me 2 days ago, you're being remarkably invasive. I prefer helpful, he replied, not turning around. Besides, we're friends now. Friends help each other. Friends usually have more than 48 hours of history. Quality over quantity. He dried the last bowl and turned to face me. Some people know each other for years and never really connect. Others meet and immediately understand each other. I think we're the latter. He was right, and that terrified me, because understanding someone meant letting them in. And letting someone in meant giving them the power to hurt you when you inevitably left. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Your father and I will arrive Saturday morning. We're staying at Hotel Central. Don't argue. I showed Raphael the message. My parents are coming this weekend. That's good, isn't it? You'll need support. You don't know my mother, I said dryly. She's going to arrive with 17 different opinions about my treatment. At least 3 alternative medicine suggestions, and a detailed plan for how I should reorganize my entire life. Raphael laughed. She sounds formidable. That's one word for it. I hesitated, then asked, "Would you want to meet them? My parents, I mean. Not this weekend, that would be too much. But maybe sometime after they've settled in." The question surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise Raphael. I wasn't sure why I'd asked. We weren't dating. We'd established we were just friends. But the thought of navigating my mother's well-meaning intensity without Raphael's steady presence felt suddenly overwhelming. "I'd like that," Raphael said quietly. "If you're sure." Before I could respond, another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "Valentina, this is Dr. Cardoso. I wanted to check in on how you're feeling after your first day on the new medications. Any concerns or side effects? Please don't hesitate to call the emergency line. Otherwise, I'll see you at your follow-up next week." The personal attention was touching, if also slightly unnerving. I showed Raphael the message. "She seems thorough," he observed. "Everyone in my life suddenly seems thorough," I said pointedly. He had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "Can you blame us? You collapsed in a practice room less than 48 hours ago." "Technically, I almost collapsed. You caught me before I actually hit the floor, a distinction I'm sure would comfort everyone greatly." He checked his watch. "I should go, let you get some rest, but I'll text you tomorrow to check in." "Raphael, just as a friend," he interrupted. "Friends check on each other, especially when one of them is adjusting to new heart medications." After he left, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, too tired to get up and turn on lights. Amadeus purred in my lap, his warm weight a small comfort against the enormity of everything that had changed. My phone buzzed again. "Raphael. Home safely. Take your evening medications. And Valentina, thank you for letting me help." I stared at the message for a long moment before responding. "Thank you for insisting." His reply came immediately. "Someone has to. You're terrible at taking care of yourself." "I've been doing fine for 26 years, I typed back. "Define fine," he shot back, echoing my earlier evasion about eating. Despite everything, I smiled. "Good night, Raphael." "Good night, Valentina. Sweet dreams." I took my evening medications, a small mountain of pills that I was supposed to take at specific times, and settled into bed. But sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept circling back to Raphael's words about quality over quantity, about connections that transcend time. What if he was right? What if the length of time you knew someone mattered less than the depth of understanding you reached? My grandmother had always said that some souls recognize each other instantly, that true connection wasn't measured in years, but in moments of genuine seeing. Was that what was happening here? Were Raphael and I recognizing something in each other that went deeper than circumstance? Or was I just lonely and scared, and clinging to the first person who'd shown me genuine kindness? I was still awake when my phone buzzed with another message, this one from Mariana. "Just checking in. How are you doing? Do you need anything? The students have been asking about you. Little Sophia cried when I told her you'd be out for a while. They miss you." The thought of Sophia, bright, eager Sophia who'd just mastered that Chopin prelude, crying over my absence made my chest tight in an entirely different way. I'd built my whole life around those students, around the conservatory, around the safe predictability of sheet music and scheduled lessons. Now everything was uncertain. Would I be able to go back to teaching? Would I have the energy, the stamina, the reliability that teaching required? Or would I become one of those tragic stories, the young teacher who got sick and had to give up everything she loved? "Tell Sophia I miss her too," I typed back to Mariana, "and that I'll be back as soon as the doctors clear me." It was a promise I wasn't sure I could keep, but it was the only comfort I had to offer. The week that followed established a new rhythm to my life. I woke up, took my morning medications, waited to see how they would affect me. Some days were better than others. Some days I felt almost normal, as if my heart might have decided to cooperate with the treatment. Other days, just getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. Raphael texted every morning. "Good morning. How are you feeling? Have you eaten breakfast?" And every evening, checking in. "How was your day? Did you take your evening meds?" It should have felt intrusive, this constant monitoring. But instead, it felt like a lifeline. Like someone in the world was paying attention, was invested in whether I made it through another day. We fell into a routine. Raphael would stop by 3 or 4 times a week, always with food, soup, sandwiches, once an entire roasted chicken he'd somehow convinced his aunt to make. We'd eat together at my small kitchen table, talking about everything and nothing. His work on the Teatro municipal renovation, my students and their various quirks, his family in São Paulo, my complicated relationship with my parents. We didn't talk about my heart. We didn't talk about his mother. We didn't talk about the future or the past or anything too heavy. We just existed together, and it was both the most comfortable and most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. Because somewhere between the soup deliveries and the medication reminders and the late-night texts, I was falling for Rafael Estrada. And falling for someone when your heart was already failing seemed like the worst possible timing in the history of terrible timing. It was Thursday night, 5 days after my diagnosis, when everything shifted. Rafael had brought Indian food this time, palak paneer and garlic naan from a place near his office. We were eating and arguing good-naturedly about whether Chopin or Debussy was superior. Chopin, obviously, but Rafael was stubbornly Team Debussy, when my phone rang. Dr. Cardoso. I answered immediately, my appetite disappearing. Doctors didn't call at 8 p.m. with good news. "Miss Montero," Dr. Cardoso said, and I could hear the careful control in her voice. "I need you to come to the hospital tomorrow morning. We got the results back from some additional tests we ran, and there are some things we need to discuss." "What kind of things?" My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I'd rather discuss it in person. Can you come in at 9 a.m.? After I hung up, I sat staring at my cooling food, my hands trembling. "Valentina?" Raphael's voice was gentle. "What did she say?" "She wants me to come in tomorrow." I met his eyes. She wouldn't tell me why over the phone. We both knew what that meant. In my experience, doctors only insisted on in-person conversations when the news was bad enough that you might need support to process it. "I'll go with you," Raphael said immediately. "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "I want to. Please, Valentina. Let me be there." I looked at our joined hands, his large and warm, mine small and trembling. I should pull away, I thought. I should protect him from whatever comes next. I should push him away before he gets any more involved. But I didn't. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." That night, after Raphael left, I stood at my window looking out at the city lights and wondered what tomorrow would bring. More bad news. A worsening prognosis. The conversation about transplants that Dr. Ferreira had said we weren't ready for yet. My reflection in the glass looked like a ghost, pale, insubstantial, already halfway to disappearing. But when I looked at my phone and saw Raphael's goodnight message, "Whatever tomorrow brings, we'll face it together. You're not alone anymore." I felt something shift in my chest. Not my failing heart, though that was still doing its irregular dance. Something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope, mixed with something even more dangerous. Love. I was falling in love with Rafael Estrada, and it was the worst possible thing that could happen. Because loving someone meant giving them a front row seat to watch you die. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Dr. Cardoso's face as she delivered whatever news was important enough to require an in-person conversation. By 4 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and sat at my piano, the small upright I'd bought secondhand when I first moved to the city, its keys worn smooth by decades of other hands. My fingers found Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece my grandmother had been playing the last time I saw her alive. I'd been 11, visiting for the summer, and she'd let me sit beside her on the bench, our hands sometimes crossing as we played together. She'd smelled like lavender and coffee, and her hands had been thin and elegant, marked with age spots but still impossibly graceful. Music is the closest we come to touching eternity, she'd told me that day. When you play, you're connecting with every person who's ever played this piece, and every person who ever will. It's a conversation across time. I'd found her 3 hours later, slumped over the piano, those elegant hands finally still. Now I played her favorite nocturne in the pre-dawn darkness of my apartment, and I understood what she'd meant. I could feel her in the music, could sense her presence in every carefully placed note. If I closed my eyes, I could almost believe she was sitting beside me again, our hands crossing in the familiar patterns. My phone buzzed at 6:30 a.m. Raphael. I know you're awake. I can feel it. Want me to bring breakfast before we go? Despite everything, I smiled. He was learning to read me already, understanding my patterns. How did you know I was awake? Because I'm awake too, and I'm not the one facing a potentially life-altering medical conversation in 3 hours. Coffee and pão na chapa in 30 minutes. You're going to make me fat with all this feeding, I typed back. You're going to waste away if someone doesn't feed you, came his instant reply. See you soon. True to his word, Raphael arrived 30 minutes later with coffee from my favorite cafe and perfectly grilled pão na chapa with butter melting into the crispy surface. He also looked like he hadn't slept, his hair slightly disheveled and shadows under his eyes. You look terrible, I said as he set up breakfast on my kitchen table. Good morning to you too, he replied dryly. You're not exactly glowing yourself. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that had become natural between us over the past week. I noticed he'd remembered exactly how I took my coffee. 2 sugars, splash of milk, and had even brought the cinnamon I liked to sprinkle on top. Raphael, I said quietly, setting down my coffee cup. What are we doing? He looked up from his own breakfast, his amber eyes meeting mine. Having breakfast before a doctor's appointment. You know what I mean. I gestured between us. This, whatever this is. You're here every day, bringing me food, checking on me, rearranging your entire life around my medical crisis. I'm being your friend, he interrupted. Like we agreed. Friends don't usually. I trailed off, unsure how to articulate what I was feeling. Friends don't feel like this. The words hung in the air between us. Raphael set down his own cup carefully, his expression unreadable. And how does this feel, Valentina? I wanted to lie. Wanted to backtrack, to pretend I hadn't just admitted to feelings I'd been trying desperately to ignore. But I was so tired of lying, of pretending, of protecting everyone but myself. Dangerous, I said finally. It feels dangerous. Because I'm falling for you, Raphael, and that's the worst possible thing that could happen. You're going to watch me decline. You're going to see me get sicker, weaker, until maybe there's nothing left to love. And that's not fair to you. Raphael was quiet for a long moment, his hands wrapped around his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, but raw. Can I tell you something? Something I've never told anyone except my therapist? I nodded, my heart doing its irregular dance. After my mother died, I was so angry. Not at her exactly, but at the universe, at fate, at the fact that we don't get to choose how much time we have. I stopped playing piano because every note reminded me of what I'd lost. I stopped listening to music entirely for almost 2 years. and I promised myself I would never care about anyone that deeply again, because losing them hurt too much. He paused, his fingers tightening around the cup. I've kept that promise for 12 years, Valentina. I've had relationships, sure, but nothing real. Nothing that mattered. I've built walls so high that nobody could get close enough to hurt me when they inevitably left. And then I walked into your practice room and saw you struggling to hide how unwell you were, and something in those walls just cracked. Raphael, let me finish. His eyes met mine, and there was such intensity in them that I couldn't look away. You said it's not fair to me, watching you decline. But what if that's not your choice to make? What if I've already decided that whatever time we have, weeks, months, years, is worth more than a lifetime of protecting myself from loss? Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unexpected. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what it's like. You're right. I don't know what it's like to be you. But I do know what it's like to lose someone you love without ever telling them how you felt. I do know what it's like to wish for just one more conversation, one more day, one more chance to say the things that matter. He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. So, here's what I'm saying, Valentina. I'm falling for you too. And maybe that's terrifying. And maybe it's going to hurt like hell when things get harder. But I'd rather have that than the safe alternative of never feeling anything at all. I couldn't speak, couldn't find words adequate to the enormity of what he was offering. So instead, I did the only thing I could think of. I stood, walked around the table, and kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate and scared, and full of everything I couldn't say. All the fear and hope and impossible longing I'd been carrying. Raphael's arms came around me immediately, holding me like I was precious, like I was something worth fighting for. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. We should probably talk about this, he said, his voice rough. After the appointment, I whispered. I can't process both things at once. Fair enough. He pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. But Valentina, whatever Dr. Cardoso says today, we face it together, okay? Okay. The drive to Hospital San Lucas felt both too short and impossibly long. Raphael held my hand the entire way, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in my kitchen, in that kiss that had changed everything. Dr. Cardoso was waiting for us in her office rather than an exam room, which I took as a bad sign. She greeted Raphael with a nod of recognition. Apparently, my chart now noted that he was my support person, and gestured for us to sit. Thank you for coming in on short notice, she began, her hands folded on her desk. I wanted to discuss the results from the additional cardiac MRI we did last week, as well as some genetic testing we ran. My hand tightened on Raphael's. He squeezed back, steady and present. The MRI showed more extensive damage to your left ventricle than we initially thought, Dr. Cardoso continued. Your ejection fraction has dropped to 32%, which puts you in the moderate to severe range of heart failure. The words seemed to echo in the small office. Moderate to severe. Heart failure. My brain tried to process the clinical terminology while my actual failing heart hammered against my ribs. What does that mean? Raphael asked when I couldn't find my voice. In practical terms, Dr. Cardoso's expression was kind, but unflinching. It means the medications alone aren't going to be enough. We need to consider more aggressive treatment options. Like what? I managed to whisper. I'm recommending we place an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD. It's a small device that monitors your heart rhythm and can deliver an electrical shock if it detects a dangerous arrhythmia. It essentially acts as a safeguard against sudden cardiac arrest. A shock, I repeated numbly. Like I couldn't even say the words. Like a built-in defibrillator, yes, Dr. Cardoso confirmed. The good news is that it's a minimally invasive procedure. We make a small incision, place the device just under the skin near your collarbone, and thread the leads into your heart. You'd be awake for most of it, under local anesthesia. The room was spinning. I focused on Raphael's hand in mine, using it as an anchor. And if she doesn't get the ICD? Raphael asked, his voice carefully neutral. Dr. Cardoso's pause told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. Then we risk sudden cardiac death. With her current ejection fraction and the genetic markers we found, Valentina is at high risk for ventricular arrhythmias that could be fatal. The ICD significantly reduces that risk. When would we do this? I heard myself ask. I'd like to schedule it for next week. The sooner, the better. Next week. 7 days to prepare for having a device implanted in my chest that would shock my heart if it tried to kill me. 7 days to adjust to this new reality where I was officially sick enough to need mechanical intervention to stay alive. There's something else, Dr. Cardoso said, and I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of there being more. The genetic testing came back positive for a mutation in the LMNA gene. It's associated with dilated cardiomyopathy, but it also carries implications for disease progression and other considerations. Other considerations? Raphael prompted when I remained silent. It means this condition is likely to progress faster than average, Dr. Cardoso said gently. And it means that if Valentina chooses to have children in the future, there would be a 50% chance of passing on the mutation. Children. A future. Things I'd barely allowed myself to think about even before the diagnosis. Now they felt like cruel jokes, possibilities dangling just out of reach. I understand this is a lot to process, Dr. Cardoso continued. I'm going to have my nurse give you information packets about the ICD, including what to expect before, during, and after the procedure. And I want you to know that while this is serious, people live full lives with these devices. You'll have some restrictions, no contact sports, careful around certain electronics, but you can still work, still travel, still do most of the things you love. Still play piano, I thought. Still teach. Still pretend to be normal while a machine kept me alive. After Dr. Cardoso finished going over the details, we sat in Raphael's car in the hospital parking lot, neither of us moving to start the engine. The morning sun was bright and cheerful, completely at odds with the darkness I felt settling over me. Say something, Raphael finally said. Anything. I need a robot heart to keep me alive, I said, my voice flat. And I can't have children without risking passing this on to them. And I'm going to die young anyway, device or no device, because this thing is progressive and genetic and there's no cure. Valentina? No. I turned to look at him, and I could feel tears streaming down my face even though I couldn't remember starting to cry. You need to hear this. You need to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't going to get better. This is just buying time. Delaying the inevitable. And you should leave now, before you're in too deep, before watching me fall apart destroys you the way losing your mother did. Raphael's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. Might start the car and drive me home and then disappear from my life, protecting himself from the pain I knew was coming. Instead, he reached over and unbuckled my seatbelt, then pulled me across the center console into his arms. I resisted for all of 2 seconds before collapsing against his chest, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I'm not leaving, he said firmly, his hand stroking my hair. I'm not going anywhere. Do you hear me, Valentina? You don't get to push me away to protect me. I'm a grown man making a conscious choice, and I choose you, robot heart and all. You're an idiot, I sobbed into his sweater. Probably, he agreed, but I'm your idiot. We sat like that for a long time, me crying and him holding me, until I'd run out of tears and was left with just hiccuping breaths and a headache. When I finally pulled back, his sweater was soaked, and his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Sorry about your sweater," I said weakly. "I have others." He wiped my face with his thumb, gentle and careful. "Valentina, I need you to listen to me. What Dr. Cardoso said today was scary. It was a lot, but it's not a death sentence. It's a treatment plan. And we're going to follow it, and you're going to get that ICD, and then we're going to figure out the rest as it comes. Just like that? Just like that." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "One day at a time. One treatment at a time. Together." I wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea, why he should protect himself, why I couldn't let him do this. But I was so tired. Tired of fighting alone. Tired of being strong. Tired of pretending I didn't desperately want exactly what he was offering. "My parents arrive tomorrow," I said instead. "They're going to lose their minds when they find out about the ICD." "Then it's a good thing you'll have backup," Raphael said. "I make an excellent buffer against overbearing parents. You don't know my mother. I'm an architect who regularly deals with city planning committees and historical preservation boards. I think I can handle one concerned mother." Despite everything, I laughed. It came out watery and a little hysterical, but it was genuine. Raphael smiled, that soft expression I was beginning to recognize as reserved specifically for me. "There she is," he said quietly. "I was worried I'd lost you for a minute there." "You almost did." I settled back into my own seat, suddenly exhausted. "I almost convinced myself to push you away." "I know, but I'm harder to get rid of than that." He started the engine finally. "Now, let's get you home. You need to rest before your parents descend tomorrow, and I need to research ICDs so I know what questions to ask next week." "Raphael." "Not negotiable," he interrupted. "If you're getting a device implanted in your chest, I'm learning everything there is to know about it. That's what partners do." Partners. The word hung in the air between us, weighted with meaning. "Is that what we are?" I asked softly. "Partners?" Raphael reached over and laced his fingers through mine. "If you'll have me." I looked at our joined hands, his large and steady, mine small and trembling. I thought about everything that could go wrong, all the ways this could end in heartbreak. I thought about the ICD I'd soon carry in my chest, the genetic mutation in my cells, the uncertain future stretching before me. And then I thought about Raphael's words from this morning. I'd rather have that than the safe alternative of never feeling anything at all. "Yes," I said, squeezing his hand. "Yes, I'll have you." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "Then we'll face whatever comes next together." As we drove back through the city toward my apartment, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there. It would probably always be there. But beside it now was something else, something warm and terrifying and impossibly precious. Hope and love. And the radical idea that maybe, just maybe, the time I had left deserved to be lived instead of endured. Even if that time came with a shock device and genetic mutations and a declining ejection fraction. Even if it meant letting Raphael see me at my worst. Even if it meant risking the kind of pain that came from loving someone you knew you'd eventually lose, maybe especially then. Because if my grandmother had taught me anything, it was that music, like love, was the closest we came to touching eternity. And every moment spent creating something beautiful was worth the inevitable silence that followed. I just had to be brave enough to play. My parents arrived at 9 a.m. on Saturday, which meant they'd caught the first bus from Porto Alegre at 5 in the morning. My mother, Isabella Montero, swept into my apartment like a force of nature, immediately cataloging everything wrong with my living situation. The apartment was too small, too dark, the neighborhood too questionable. Why didn't I have more food in the refrigerator? Was I eating enough, sleeping enough, taking care of myself. Maman. I tried to interrupt, but she was already in my kitchen, opening cabinets and making disapproving noises at my sparse collection of canned soup and pasta. My father, Paolo, gave me a sympathetic look as he set down their overnight bags. He was quieter than my mother, a retired accountant who'd learned long ago that sometimes the best strategy was to let the storm pass. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt myself relax slightly into his familiar warmth. "How are you really doing, Fila?" he asked quietly. "I'm scared," I admitted, the honesty surprising me. "But I'm okay." "Your mother has been researching heart conditions nonstop since you called," he said. "I had to hide her laptop twice just to get her to sleep. She's worried." "I know. She also loves you very much." "I know that too." My mother emerged from the kitchen with a list she'd apparently started on the bus. "We need to go grocery shopping. Real food, not this processed nonsense. And we should talk to your doctors about alternative treatments, acupuncture, herbal supplements. My friend Maria swears by." "Maman, I'm getting an ICD implanted on Tuesday," I said, cutting through her planning. "That's the treatment plan. The doctors know what they're doing." She stopped mid-sentence, her face paling. "Tuesday? That's only 3 days from now. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We would have come immediately." "Because I just found out yesterday," I said gently, "and I knew you'd worry." "Of course we worry. You're our daughter, and you have your grandmother's condition and—" Her voice broke, and suddenly she was crying, all her fierce energy dissolving into fear. I crossed to her, letting her pull me into a tight embrace. She smelled like the lavender soap she'd used for as long as I could remember, and for a moment I was 11 again, being comforted after a nightmare. "I'm going to be okay," I said, hoping it was true. "The ICD will help. The medications are helping. I have good doctors." "And you have support?" my father asked. "Friends? People helping you?" As if summoned, there was a knock at my door. I knew before I opened it that it would be Raphael. We'd planned for him to come over at 10 so I could introduce him to my parents, though now I wondered if this was the worst possible timing. "Valentina, I brought those groceries we talked about." Raphael stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. My tearful mother, my concerned father, me looking exhausted and overwhelmed. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize your parents had already arrived. I can come back later." "No, it's fine," I said quickly. "Maman, Papai, this is Rafael Estrada. He's been helping me since the diagnosis." My mother's tears stopped immediately, replaced by the sharp assessment of a woman evaluating her daughter's potential romantic interest. She looked Raphael up and down, his casual Saturday clothes, the reusable shopping bags full of groceries in his hands, the concern evident in his expression. "Helping how?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "I'm a friend," Raphael said, setting down the groceries and offering his hand. I was actually looking for piano lessons when Valentina had her initial episode. I drove her to the hospital and, well, we've been friends since. "Friends who bring groceries," my father observed, shaking Raphael's hand with the firm grip he reserved for people he was sizing up. "Friends who make sure Valentina eats more than coffee and determination," Raphael replied with a slight smile. "She's terrible at taking care of herself." "This is true," my mother agreed, and I could see her warming to him despite her obvious concerns. "But you've been spending a lot of time with our daughter, Mr. Estrada." "Raphael, please. And yes, I have been. If that's a problem—" "It's not a problem," I interrupted, moving to stand beside Raphael. "He's been incredibly supportive. I don't know how I would have gotten through this week without him." My parents exchanged one of their silent communication looks, the kind developed over 35 years of marriage. My father gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Well then," my mother said, her tone softening. "We should thank you for taking care of our daughter. Though I hope you know what you're getting into, young man. Valentina is stubborn, terrible at asking for help, and has inherited her grandmother's complete disregard for medical advice." "I've noticed," Raphael said, and there was warmth in his voice that made my chest tight. "But she's also brave, talented, and stronger than she gives herself credit for." The way he said it, like these were simple facts rather than compliments, made my mother's expression shift from protective assessment to something softer. "You should stay for lunch," she declared. "I was just about to make something proper with whatever Valentina has in this disaster of a kitchen." "I brought ingredients for feijoada," Raphael offered. "My aunt's recipe. If you'd like help." "You cook?" My mother looked genuinely surprised. "My mother was a pianist," Raphael said. "She believed that creating music and creating food came from the same place, a desire to bring beauty into the world. She taught me to cook before I could reach the stove without a stool." I watched my mother's face transform completely. Any remaining resistance crumbled in the face of Raphael's sincerity and the mention of his mother's philosophy. "Then we'll cook together," she said. "Paolo, set the table. Valentina, sit down before you fall down. You look exhausted." For the next 2 hours I sat at my small kitchen table with my father, while my mother and Raphael prepared lunch together. I watched them move around my tiny kitchen, my mother directing and Raphael following her instructions with the same patient attention he brought to everything. They fell into an easy rhythm, talking about cooking techniques and ingredients, about music and family. "He seems like a good man," my father said quietly, watching them work. "How serious is this?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It's fast, maybe too fast, but he makes me feel less alone. That's important." My father reached over and squeezed my hand. "Your mother and I, we want you to be happy. However long you have, and we're praying it's a very long time. We want you to live, not just exist." "I'm scared, Papai," I whispered. "Scared of the surgery, scared of the disease, scared of letting Raphael get too close when I don't know what my future looks like." "Being scared is smart," he said. "Being scared means you understand the stakes. But don't let fear stop you from accepting love when it's offered. That would be the real tragedy." Lunch was chaotic and warm, my mother telling embarrassing stories about my childhood while Raphael shared equally mortifying tales from his own. My father asked intelligent questions about the Teatro Municipal renovation, genuinely interested in Raphael's work. And through it all, Raphael kept checking on me, making sure I had enough to eat, that I was drinking water, that I hadn't forgotten my afternoon medications. "You're very attentive," my mother observed, watching Raphael refill my water glass before I'd even realized it was empty. "Someone has to be," Raphael replied, meeting my eyes across the table. "Valentina tends to forget the basics when she's stressed." "Like mother, like daughter," my father said dryly. "Isabella once got so focused on a project that she forgot to eat for 2 days. It was 1 day," my mother protested, "maybe a day and a half. After lunch, my parents insisted on cleaning up, which gave Raphael and me a moment alone on my small balcony. The November afternoon was warm, the city spread out below us in all its chaotic beauty. "Your parents are lovely," Raphael said, leaning against the railing. "My mother likes you," I replied. "That's dangerous. She's going to start planning our wedding. Would that be so terrible?" The question was light, but there was something serious underneath it. I looked at him, at this man who'd walked into my life at exactly the wrong moment and refused to leave despite every reason he should. "Raphael, we've known each other for 8 days. 8 of the most intense days of my life," he countered. "Valentina, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm just saying, I wouldn't be opposed to the idea, eventually, if things continue the way they're going." My heart did its irregular flutter, but for once it had nothing to do with my medical condition. You're insane. Probably. He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together. But I'm also serious. When you find something real, something that matters, you don't let it go just because the timing isn't perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. Before I could respond, my mother appeared in the doorway. Valentina, we should talk about Tuesday. The procedure. What do you need? Should we postpone our return to Porto Alegre? You don't have to stay, I said, though part of me desperately wanted them to. Raphael will be there. We're staying, my father said firmly, joining us on the balcony. We'll get a hotel near the hospital. We want to be there. But your work can wait, my mother finished. You're more important. And besides, if Raphael is going to be your support person, he should have support too. These things are stressful for everyone involved. I looked between my parents and Raphael, at this makeshift family that had formed around my crisis, and felt something crack open in my chest. For years, I'd prided myself on my independence, on not needing anyone. But maybe that wasn't strength. Maybe real strength was accepting help when it was offered. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. All of you. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. My mother took over my apartment with the efficiency of a general organizing troops. She stocked my refrigerator, reorganized my kitchen, even bought new sheets for my bed, because mine were unacceptable for someone recovering from surgery. My father researched ICDs until he could explain the procedure better than most doctors. He made lists of questions for the surgical team, researched success rates, found online support groups for people with cardiac devices. And Raphael was simply there, steady and present, helping my parents, keeping me company, making sure I took my medications on schedule. He stayed late into the evening, leaving only when my mother insisted I needed rest. On Monday night, the night before the procedure, my parents took a rare evening off to have dinner at their hotel, giving Raphael and me time alone. We sat on my couch, Amadeus purring between us, neither of us quite able to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Are you scared? Raphael finally asked. Terrified, I admitted. They're going to cut into me, thread wires into my heart, implant a device that will shock me if my heart tries to kill me. How could I not be scared? Fair point. His arm came around my shoulders, pulling me close. For what it's worth, I'm scared too. You're not the one having surgery. No, but you are. And that scares me more than if it were happening to me. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. I know we haven't known each other long, but Valentina, you've become incredibly important to me. The thought of something going wrong tomorrow. Nothing's going to go wrong, I said, more to convince myself than him. It's a routine procedure. Thousands of people get ICDs every year. I know, but you're not thousands of people. You're you. I tilted my head up to look at him. Raphael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Always. If things get worse, if the ICD isn't enough, if I need a transplant, I couldn't quite say if I'm dying. If things get really bad, I need to know you'll be okay. That you won't blame yourself for getting involved with someone who... He kissed me, cutting off the words. It was gentle and fierce at once, a promise and a plea. I will never be okay with losing you, he said when we broke apart. But I will never regret knowing you, loving you, being part of your life. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens in the future, I choose this. I choose you. Every single time. I love you, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. I know it's too soon, and I know it's complicated, but I do. I love you. Raphael's smile was brilliant and heartbreaking. I love you too. And for the record, I don't think 8 days is too soon when those 8 days have been the most real thing I've experienced in 12 years. We stayed like that for hours, wrapped around each other on my couch, talking about everything and nothing. About his work, my students, our childhoods, our dreams, about the future we might have if we were lucky, if I was lucky. When he finally left at midnight, with strict instructions from my mother that I needed to sleep before surgery, he kissed me at the door like it was both hello and goodbye. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. "I'll be there when you wake up." "Promise?" "Promise." After he left, I stood in my quiet apartment and let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The fear, the love, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, things would work out. That the ICD would help. That I'd respond to treatment. That I'd get more than just a few months or years with Raphael. That I'd get a lifetime. My phone buzzed with a text from Raphael. "I love you. Sleep well. Tomorrow is just another step. We've got this." I smiled through my tears and typed back, "We've got this." And for the first time since my diagnosis, I almost believed it. The pre-op room was cold and smelled of antiseptic and fear. I sat on the gurney in my hospital gown, my parents on one side, Raphael on the other, all of us pretending this was routine. Just another Tuesday. Just a simple procedure. They said it would take about 2 hours, my mother said for the third time, her hand gripping mine so tightly I was losing circulation. 2 hours, and then you'll be in recovery. I know, Mama. I squeezed back, trying to offer comfort I didn't feel. Raphael hadn't said much since we'd arrived. He just held my other hand, his thumb tracing those familiar circles on my palm, his presence steady, even when his eyes betrayed his worry. "Mr. and Mrs. Montero?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. "We have a family waiting room set up for you. It's more comfortable than sitting in the hallway." My father stood, understanding the implicit message that they needed to leave soon. He kissed my forehead, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You're strong, Fila. Just like your grandmother. You'll get through this." My mother's goodbye took longer, involved more tears and repeated instructions to the surgical team that I was her only daughter, and they better take excellent care of me. Finally, my father gently pulled her away, leaving me alone with Raphael. "I should go too," he said, but he didn't move. "Let you rest before they come get you." "Stay," I whispered. "Please, just a few more minutes." He shifted closer, carefully avoiding the IV line they'd already placed. "I'll be right there when you wake up. First face you see, I promise." "What if something goes wrong?" "It won't. But if it does..." "Valentina." He cupped my face in his hands. "Look at me. Nothing is going to go wrong. You're going to have a very boring routine procedure. And then you're going to wake up with a fancy new device that will keep you safe. And then we're going to go home and argue about whether Chopin or Debussy is superior while your mother feeds us too much food." Despite everything, I smiled. Chopin. Obviously. He kissed me softly. "I love you, and I'll see you in a few hours." They came for me 10 minutes later. The last thing I saw before the sedation took hold was Raphael standing in the doorway, his hand pressed against the glass, his lips forming words I couldn't hear but understood anyway. "I love you." I woke to pain and the steady beep of monitors. My chest felt like someone had been using it as a punching bag, which I supposed wasn't far from the truth. There was a pressure near my collarbone, foreign and uncomfortable. "Valentina?" Raphael's voice, rough like he'd been crying or shouting or both. "Can you hear me?" I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. He was there immediately with ice chips, helping me take small sips of water until I could form words. "Surgery over?" I croaked. "Yes." He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, hair disheveled. "You did great. Everything went perfectly." But there was something in his voice, some note of concern that didn't match his words. "What's wrong?" I managed. "Nothing's wrong. You just need to rest." "Raphael." I forced my eyes to focus on his face. "What aren't you telling me?" He exchanged a glance with someone I couldn't see. Dr. Cardoso stepped into view, her expression professionally neutral but kind. "The surgery went well," she said. "The ICD is in place and functioning properly. But during the procedure, we saw something concerning. Your ejection fraction has dropped again, down to 28%, and there are signs that the disease is progressing faster than we'd hoped." The words seemed to come from very far away. 28%, faster than hoped. "What does that mean?" I whispered. Dr. Cardoso pulled up a chair, sitting so we were eye level. "It means we need to start thinking more seriously about a transplant. I'm referring you to the cardiac transplant team at Hospital du Corazon. They'll do a full evaluation, determine if you're a good candidate." A transplant. The word I'd been dreading since the diagnosis. "How long?" Raphael asked, his hand finding mine. "We can't know for certain," Dr. Cardoso said, "but based on the progression we're seeing, I'd estimate she has somewhere between 6 months to 2 years before her heart reaches the point where a transplant becomes critical." 6 months to 2 years. Not the decades I'd been hoping for. Not even the handful of years I'd started to accept. Just months. "I want to talk to Valentina alone," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Please. Just for a minute." Dr. Cardoso nodded and left. My parents, who'd apparently been standing in the hallway, poked their heads in, but I shook my head. They retreated, though my mother looked like it physically pained her to leave. Raphael started to stand, but I gripped his hand. "Not you. You stay." He sank back down, his eyes searching my face. "Tell me the truth," I said. "All of it. What did the doctors say when I was still under? What are you not telling me?" Raphael's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, might try to protect me from whatever truth he was carrying. Then he sighed. "They said the genetic mutation makes this type of cardiomyopathy particularly aggressive. That even with a transplant there are no guarantees. That you might not be a candidate, or you might not get a heart in time, or..." His voice broke. "Or we might run out of time before any of that matters." The honesty was brutal and necessary. I needed to know. Needed to understand exactly what I was facing. "Thank you," I whispered, "for not lying to me." "I won't lie to you," he said fiercely. "Not about this. Not about anything. We face this together, with all the truth, or we don't face it at all. Even if the truth is that I might die waiting for a heart, even then." He brought my hand to his lips. "But you're not going to die, Valentina. You're going to fight. You're going to get evaluated, get on the transplant list, and get a new heart. And then we're going to have decades together. You hear me? Decades." I wanted to believe him, wanted to grab onto that certainty and hold it like a lifeline. But the fear was so big, so overwhelming, that hope felt impossibly small in comparison. "I'm scared," I admitted. "I know. I'm scared too. But we're going to get through this." The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. The transplant evaluation was grueling. Dozens of tests, consultations with specialists, psychological evaluations to make sure I was mentally prepared for the reality of living with a donor organ. They approved me for the transplant list in January, and then began the waiting. Waiting was its own special kind of torture. Every phone call could be the call. Every day could be the day, or not. The uncertainty was exhausting. My condition deteriorated slowly but steadily. By March, I could barely walk from my bedroom to my kitchen without getting winded. I had to give up teaching entirely, which broke my heart almost as much as my actual heart was breaking. My students sent cards and videos, little Sophia performing the Chopin prelude I'd taught her, tears streaming down her face. Raphael was there through all of it. He moved into my apartment in February, when it became clear I couldn't manage alone. My mother wanted me to move back to Porto Alegre, but I refused. This was my life, my city. I wasn't giving it up. We fell into new rhythms. Raphael working remotely, taking calls from architects and contractors while keeping one eye on me. Me on the couch, too tired to do much more than read or watch the city through my window. We talked about everything. His mother, my grandmother, what we'd do when I got my new heart. Because we refused to say if. It was always when. When you get your new heart, Raphael would say, we're going to travel. Paris, Vienna, all the places with great concert halls. When I get my new heart, I'd reply, I'm going to play piano for hours without getting tired. When you get your new heart, he said one night in April, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket, I'd like to marry you, if you'll have me. I stared at the box, at the simple gold band with a small diamond, at this man who'd rearranged his entire life around my dying heart. That's not a question, I said, tears already falling. Valentina Montero, he said formally, dropping to one knee beside the couch where I lay. Will you marry me? Will you let me be there for all of it, the good days and bad days, the treatments and recoveries, the fear and the hope? Will you let me love you for however long we have? Yes, I whispered. Yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring on my finger and it fit perfectly. Like everything about us. Wrong timing, impossible circumstances, but somehow exactly right. The call came on a Tuesday night in late May. I was sleeping when my phone rang, Raphael's arm around me, Amadeus purring at our feet. I almost didn't answer. It was 2 a.m., probably a wrong number, but something made me look at the screen. Hospital du Corazon. This is Valentina, I said, my voice shaking. Ms. Montero, this is the transplant coordinator. We have a heart. The next hours were chaos. The ambulance ride to the hospital, my parents rushing from their hotel, Raphael never leaving my side, the pre-op procedures, the consent forms, the moment when they wheeled me toward the operating room and I had to say what might be goodbye. I love you, I told Raphael, gripping his hand. If something happens, nothing is going to happen, he said firmly. You're going to get through this surgery, and you're going to wake up with a strong, healthy heart. And then we're getting married. Those are the facts. I love you, I said again. I love you too, so much. Now go get your new heart. I woke up 3 days later in the ICU. The first thing I noticed was the absence of the irregular rhythm I'd lived with for 8 months. My heart was beating. Steadily. Strongly. Normally. The second thing I noticed was Raphael, asleep in a chair beside my bed, his hand wrapped around mine even in sleep. Raphael, I whispered. His eyes flew open immediately. Valentina, oh thank God. You're awake. My heart, I said wonderingly. It's beating right. It is. He was crying and smiling at the same time. You have a beautiful, strong, healthy heart, and it's yours. The recovery was long and difficult. There were complications, rejection episodes, infections, the constant adjustments of immunosuppressant medications. But I was alive. My new heart kept beating, strong and steady, and slowly, impossibly, I got stronger too. By August, I could walk around the block without getting winded. By September, I was back at the conservatory, teaching just a few hours a week. By October, I could play piano for an entire hour without needing to rest. And in November, Exactly 1 year after Raphael had walked into my practice room, we got married. It was small, just my parents, Raphael's family, a few close friends, and my students. We held it in the conservatory, me in a simple white dress, Raphael in a navy suit, both of us crying through our vows. I promise to love you, I said, to trust you, to let you help me. I promise to be brave enough to accept every day as a gift, to live instead of just survive. I promise to love you, Raphael said, to stand beside you through everything, to never give up hope. I promise that whatever time we have together, I'll make sure you know every single day how extraordinary you are. After the ceremony, we walked to the bench outside the conservatory, where I'd sat so many times before, overwhelmed and alone. Raphael pulled out his phone and played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, my grandmother's favorite. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand. We swayed there on the sidewalk, my hand over my new heart, feeling it beat strong and steady against my palm. This heart that had belonged to someone else, someone brave enough to be an organ donor, someone whose death had given me life. "Thank you," I whispered to the donor I'd never know. "Thank you for this chance." Raphael pulled me closer. "What are you thinking about?" "About how a year ago I couldn't imagine a future," I said, "and now I can't imagine anything else." "What do you see?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, at my husband, at this man who'd taught me that staying was the most beautiful of choices. "Everything," I said. "I see everything." And I did. A future full of music and love, of challenges met together, of every precious day lived fully. My heart, my miraculous, generous second-chance heart, beat strong and steady, a rhythm of hope and possibility. I'd learned that love wasn't about guarantees or certainty. It was about showing up, day after day, even when, especially when, the future was uncertain. It was about choosing courage over fear, connection over safety, living over merely existing. Raphael kissed me there on that bench, and my new heart soared. I was alive. We were alive, and that was enough.